It was supposed to be the perfect summer day. The grill was hot, drinks were flowing, and neighbors gathered in the Wilsons' backyard like they did every year. Karen, the always gracious host, smiled through the heat and laughter, proud of the life she'd built with her husband, Tom. But behind that smile was a storm waiting to erupt. She had seen something no wife should ever have to see. And tonight, with everyone gathered around their lawn chairs and burgers, Karen would expose a truth so twisted it would shatter the illusion of suburban bliss and leave everyone gasping. What happens when betrayal isn't just whispered behind closed doors, but revealed in front of an entire community? Before we continue, friends, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second for you, but for me, it's an extra motivation to keep creating videos. I'd also really appreciate a comment. Thank you for your support, and now let's continue with the story. The smoke curled upward from the grill like a lazy summer ghost, twisting into the golden light of late July. Karen Wilson flipped a row of burgers with precision born from years of tradition, her apron spotless, her smile practiced. Behind her, their spacious backyard buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses. Fairy lights zigzagged overhead, casting a soft glow on the faces of neighbors she'd known for over a decade. The kids played cornhole near the fence. Classic rock floated from the speakers. It was perfect, too perfect. Tom's voice rose from across the yard, steady, pleasant, the kind of voice that made people feel comfortable. He was talking to Bill from 2 doors down, laughing easily about summer traffic and gas prices. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms browned by weekend yard work. Karen watched him, a flicker of something tightening in her chest. She wasn't sure when it started. This feeling like she was standing on a stage, performing a version of herself while something darker played out behind the curtains. From the corner of her eye, she saw Haley. The Parker girl moved like she belonged, despite technically being just a guest. She carried a tray of lemonade with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where everything went, her sundress swaying as she walked past the folding table with sides and snacks. Her hair caught the sunlight, a golden brown cascade down her back. She smiled at the neighbors, too bright, too knowing. Karen noticed the men looking a second too long, but what sent a cold spike through her spine was the way Haley brushed her hand across Tom's arm as she passed. Just a second, barely a touch. But Tom didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. Karen blinked, her spatula hovering in midair. Her stomach coiled, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed it. The way Tom's posture shifted when Haley entered a room. How his jokes found their way toward her. How his eyes lingered when she wasn't looking. But this wasn't that. This was intentional. She turned back to the grill, jaw tight, flipping the burgers harder than necessary. The sizzle seemed louder, more accusing. She forced a laugh when Linda Parker approached, wine in hand, cheeks already flushed from too much rose and not enough food. God, Karen, you outdo yourself every year. Linda slurred slightly. Seriously, you should open a catering business. Karen smiled tightly. Well, feeding this many people is practically a business. Linda leaned in conspiratorially, her breath heavy with alcohol and gossip. I swear, if I had your energy, I'd be dangerous. You have no idea, Karen thought. She nodded, though, and offered Linda a deviled egg, watching from the corner of her eye as Haley set the lemonade down and joined Tom near the patio chairs. They laughed at something. Haley's hand brushed his again, this time more deliberately. Karen's pulse quickened. The burgers were done. She placed them on a tray and carried them to the table, trying not to let her hands shake. Everyone gathered around. Plates filled, drinks refreshed. It was all happening again like every year except not. Something had shifted, and it wasn't just in her mind. After dinner, Tom disappeared for a bit. Karen pretended not to notice at first. She busied herself with refilling chips and organizing the recycling. But when she turned around, Haley was also gone. She scanned the yard. Her guests still laughed, still drank, still listened to the neighbor's 10-year-old massacre, Sweet Home Alabama, on a plastic guitar. But Tom and Haley were nowhere to be seen. Karen moved inside. The living room was empty. The hallway quiet. She checked the bathroom, vacant. Then the den. And then, a creak from the back. She walked softly, barefoot, through the kitchen and toward the back sliding door. Through the sheer curtains, she could see the garden shed near the edge of the yard. The one Tom insisted on building himself last summer, away from the house, with double-pane windows and a lock that only he used. The motion sensor light above the shed flicked on. Karen stood frozen. Then, slowly, she slid the door open and stepped out onto the patio. Laughter erupted behind her as someone told a joke. Plates clattered. The barbecue on the surface continued unchanged. But in the shadows near the shed, Karen could make out movement, 2 figures close. Too close. She didn't go further. Not tonight. Instead, she turned around and walked back into the house. Her face pale beneath her makeup, her stomach a roiling pit of nausea and disbelief. She poured herself a glass of wine. Not the cheap stuff they served the guests. The good bottle she'd been saving for their anniversary next month. The irony was bitter. As she sipped, her phone buzzed. A message from Jenna, her sister. "How's the barbecue? Everyone behaving?" Karen stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed, "Not everyone." She didn't send it. Not yet. She deleted the message, locked her phone, and returned to the party with a fresh smile painted across her face. From across the yard, Tom emerged from the side gate, brushing something off his shirt. Haley followed a moment later, cheeks flushed, looking down at her phone like nothing had happened. Karen clapped her hands. "Who wants dessert?" Everyone cheered. She served it with practiced ease, her voice steady, her movements fluid, a performer at her peak. But inside, something had cracked. And once cracked, things don't return to the way they were. They splinter, they grow. And somewhere deep inside, Karen had already made her decision. She would not let this rot fester in silence. Not this time. Not in her house. Not under her lights. The next barbecue would be different. She would make sure of it. The knock came just after sunset. 3 slow raps, uncertain, hesitant. Karen opened the front door to find Linda Parker standing on the porch, cradling a half-empty bottle of Chardonnay like a child might cling to a stuffed toy. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, hair tangled from what looked like hours of tossing in bed. She wore sweatpants and a wrinkled blouse, one sleeve half-buttoned. "Hey!" she whispered, voice paper-thin. "Can I?" Karen stepped aside without a word. Linda drifted in like smoke, the stale scent of wine and perfume clinging to her. She dropped her purse by the wall, took off her shoes like she'd done 100 times before. But this time, everything about her movements was weighted, like she was underwater. "I'm sorry to come by like this," Linda said, collapsing onto the edge of the couch. "I didn't know where else to go." Karen studied her from the doorway, her heart thudding. "What's wrong?" Linda didn't answer right away. She took a deep breath, then held up the wine bottle like a prop. "This probably doesn't help, but it's Haley. I think something's going on with her. Something bad." Karen froze, her hands still at her sides. There was a dangerous charge in the air, like someone had lit a match in a gas-filled room. "What kind of something?" she asked carefully, her voice calm, controlled. Linda let out a bitter laugh. "Where do I start? She's barely been home, always texting, acting weirdly confident. And then today I found condoms in her purse. A hotel receipt from last month. She said it was for a college friend's birthday. But something about it just didn't feel right." Karen crossed the room slowly and sat in the chair opposite, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. She felt her pulse tick up, felt the heat climbing her neck. She already knew everything Linda was about to say, but hearing it from Haley's own mother made it feel more real and more dangerous. "I've been trying to talk to her," Linda went on, voice cracking. "She just shuts down. I'm not stupid, Karen. She's seeing someone, and I don't think it's someone appropriate. I think it's someone older." Karen tilted her head slightly. "Older? Like how old?" "I don't know." Linda wiped her face with her sleeve. "Like our age. Maybe older. Maybe someone with a family. Maybe someone we know." The words hung in the air like a slow-rot poison. For a moment, Karen considered saying it. Just blurting it out. It's Tom. It's been Tom all along. She imagined Linda's reaction. Shock giving way to horror, then rage. She imagined the screaming, the crying, the shattered wine glass on the hardwood floor. She imagined the whole truth exploding like a grenade in their living room. But instead, she said nothing. Because the truth, raw, exposed, and unfiltered, wasn't a weapon. Not yet. Not the right weapon. Instead, Karen leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Her tone softened, eyes locked on Linda's face with a faux empathy that made her stomach twist. Have you asked her directly? Linda let out a humorless laugh. She lies. Smiles right in my face and lies. And I let her. I let her because I don't know what else to do. I already feel like I've failed her. Karen nodded slowly, like someone receiving a confession. Inside, her thoughts were moving fast, sharp-edged, and strategic. If Linda found out the truth now, it would derail everything. She would go straight to Haley, demand answers, threaten her. And Haley, young, impulsive, might come clean or worse, drag Karen into the mess, painting her as a bitter, jealous wife trying to ruin her life. Worse still, if Linda confronted Tom, he'd know Karen had spoken. The game would be over. Karen needed time. She needed control. She needed the final blow to be public, undeniable, and humiliating for both of them. So she leaned back and offered Linda a sympathetic smile. She's young. They do dumb things. It doesn't mean she's lost. She's not just doing dumb things, Linda whispered, gripping the neck of the bottle tighter. She's in love. I can see it in her eyes. Whoever this guy is, she thinks he's the real deal. Karen flinched inside. That was the part she hadn't let herself consider. That maybe this wasn't just lust. That maybe Haley thought it was real. And Tom, he wasn't the type to say no when someone handed him admiration wrapped in youth and adoration. Karen felt bile rise in her throat but swallowed it down. She'll learn, she said gently. Sometimes people have to. Linda nodded, teary-eyed. I just wish I could protect her from herself. Karen reached out and squeezed her hand. You're doing more than most would. She's lucky to have you. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. After Linda left, her shoulders hunched, her steps slow. Karen stood in the doorway and watched her retreat down the street, wine bottle swinging from one hand like a white flag of surrender. Karen closed the door softly. Then she turned off the porch light, leaned against the frame, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. She had lied. Not directly, but enough. She had let another woman suffer, stumble through suspicion and heartbreak, because it served her bigger plan. Because the truth right now wasn't the goal. The goal was the reckoning. When it came, it had to burn hot enough to consume them all. And so she allowed Linda to walk back into her house in ignorance, because Karen needed her to stay blind a little longer. She knew what that made her, and she wasn't sure if she cared. Haley arrived at exactly 4:58 p.m. She knocked twice, quick and precise, then stepped back and checked her reflection in the glass of the storm door. Her lipstick was subtle, her eyes lined just enough to look older, more serious. She wore a cropped black cardigan over a pale tank top and fitted jeans, casual but intentional. Karen watched her from the kitchen, hidden just enough to observe unnoticed, her heart pounding not from nerves, but anticipation. She waited 5 seconds. Then she opened the door. Hi, Haley said, her voice light breezy. You wanted to talk? Karen gave a small, polite smile. Come in. Haley stepped inside like she'd done a dozen times before, completely unaware that this time, everything had changed. Karen gestured toward the living room. Go ahead. Sit. Haley obeyed, settling on the couch with one leg crossed over the other, hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked relaxed, even smug, like she thought she knew exactly what this was about. Karen remained standing. For a long moment, she said nothing. She studied Haley the way one might study a beautiful insect before deciding whether to trap it or crush it. She watched the girl's eyes flick around the room, at the family photos on the wall, at the untouched glass of water on the coffee table, at the unopened curtains that dimmed the afternoon light. "You've grown up a lot," Karen said finally. Haley tilted her head. "I guess. You used to play tag with my boys in this very room." "Yeah. A long time ago." Her tone was casual, but there was an undertone there. Something knowing, maybe even smug. Karen took a step forward. "And now you're kissing my husband behind the garden shed." The silence that followed was deafening. Haley blinked once, then twice. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face flushed pink, her lips parting just slightly, but no words came out. Karen didn't look away. "I have video," she said flatly. "Would you like to see it?" Haley stood suddenly, like she might flee, but Karen raised a hand. "Sit." There was something in Karen's voice, a kind of calm command that caught Haley mid-movement. She slowly lowered herself back down. Karen continued, "You're young, but not stupid, so I won't insult you by pretending this was some mistake. I just want to know one thing." She leaned in slightly. "Do you love him?" Haley swallowed. Her voice was quieter now. I don't know. That's not good enough." Haley hesitated. "He listens to me. He makes me feel seen. He doesn't treat me like a kid. And yeah, maybe I thought it was something more. But I didn't mean to hurt you." Karen's expression didn't change. "Of course you did." Haley's mouth tightened, her gaze sharpening. "Tom said you two haven't been happy for a long time. He said you barely speak anymore." Karen chuckled softly. "Of course he did. That's what they all say." Another beat of silence passed. Then Karen said something Haley didn't expect. "I'm not going to tell your mother." Haley frowned. "You're not?" "No. I'm going to tell everyone." Haley's face drained of color. Karen took a slow step forward. "But I'm giving you a choice. One chance to walk away. Disappear from his life. Block his number. Transfer to a different campus if you have to. If I so much as see a text or hear your name in my house again, I will go nuclear." "You wouldn't," Haley whispered, but there was no conviction in it. "I've already prepared everything. The video, the emails, the receipts. One click, and it's on every phone in the neighborhood. Your mother sees it. His students see it. Your classmates see it." Haley looked like she might cry. "You don't have to do this." Karen leaned in close. "You don't get to come into my house, lie to my face, and dismantle my family without consequences." "So yes, I do." They stared at each other. Two women, one hardened by betrayal, the other suddenly stripped of her illusion of control. Finally, Haley stood again. Slower this time, shoulders caving inward. "I'll leave him alone," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." Karen nodded once. "That's the smartest thing you've said all afternoon." She watched Haley leave without another word. No dramatic exit, just the soft thud of the door closing behind her. Karen remained standing for a long moment, staring at the door. Then she turned, exhaled slowly, and walked to the sink. Her hands were shaking. Not from rage, not anymore, but from something else. A deeper kind of unease that hadn't gone how she expected. Haley hadn't been the villain Karen had painted in her mind. She'd been naive, yes, manipulative maybe, but mostly lost. And still, Karen had looked her in the eye and issued a threat that could ruin her life forever. She poured herself a glass of water and drank it slowly. The calm exterior remained, but a quiet, guilty whisper had begun to murmur in the back of her mind. What had she just become? That night, Karen told Tom she was going to her sister's for a few hours. He didn't ask questions, just kissed her cheek absently and returned to his laptop, pretending to read an article. But she didn't go to Jenna's. She drove 15 minutes across town to a hotel, the one from Haley's receipt. She knew it was risky. She knew if someone saw her there, rumors could fly. But she didn't care. She walked into the lobby with quiet determination and asked the front desk clerk for a copy of the guest list from the date on the receipt. The woman hesitated, said it wasn't policy. Karen leaned in, gave her a name, and said she believed her daughter was being preyed upon by an older man. The clerk hesitated, then checked the system. Thomas Wilson, checked in. Room 204. Karen smiled. Not because it confirmed something she didn't already know, but because now she had every angle covered. She returned home after midnight. Tom was asleep on the couch, a half-empty glass of wine on the table. The TV played some nature documentary, soft and low. She turned it off and stared at him for a long time. His face looked peaceful, unbothered, like someone who still believed his lies were safe. She leaned down and whispered, "Wake up, Tom." The countdown started. He stirred but didn't wake. Karen stood straight, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Then she walked upstairs and opened her laptop. She clicked on the folder labeled evidence, selected all the files, and dragged them to a USB drive. Then she opened another folder labeled barbecue, guest list, and began writing a draft message. "Hi everyone. I wanted to share something I recently discovered. You deserve to know who you're inviting into your homes." Her finger hovered over send. Not yet, but soon. The fireworks hadn't started yet, but she could smell the smoke. The morning of the next barbecue broke with a sky too clear, too bright. Like the weather hadn't gotten the memo that a storm was coming. Karen stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a blade that sliced too easily through the skin of the tomatoes. The rhythm of it was sharp, steady, controlled, the way her entire life hadn't been for months. Jenna leaned against the counter, watching her. She hadn't stopped watching her since Karen confessed everything 2 nights earlier. About the video, the plan, the confrontation with Haley, the hotel visit, the unsent message. "You sure you want to do it like this?" Jenna asked. "In front of everyone?" Karen didn't look up. "They deserve to see the truth." Jenna hesitated. "But do your kids need to see it that way?" That question hit harder than expected. Karen stopped slicing. She'd thought about that, about the boys, about the way they still hugged their father goodnight, still asked him for help with homework, still believed in the version of him that no longer existed. They didn't see the cracks. Not yet. She'd wanted to protect that innocence a little longer. But now she wasn't sure what protecting even looked like anymore. "Maybe," Karen said finally, placing the knife down, "maybe they need to see what happens when you break something this badly." Jenna said nothing, just looked at her sister. The strength, the simmering rage, the hollowed-out grief beneath it. Then she reached over and picked up a cucumber, silently joining in the prep. The guest list had grown. Word had spread that the Wilsons were doing a second barbecue, a spontaneous midsummer get-together, and curiosity bloomed like wildfire. Neighbors who hadn't shown up for the first came this time. Even Linda confirmed she and Haley would stop by just for a little. Though her tone on the phone had been tight, uncertain, Karen could feel the suspicion growing in her. And still, she hadn't said a word. By 5 p.m., the yard was filling again. The grill sizzled. Music played. The boys ran barefoot through the grass. It was a perfect mirror of the last barbecue. Only this time, Karen controlled every thread of the tapestry. She smiled, offered drinks, asked about work promotions and vacation plans. But underneath it all, the USB drive in her pocket weighed heavy like a stone. She was waiting for the right moment. It had to feel inevitable. Tom arrived a little late, a bottle of wine in one hand, the other adjusting his shirt collar. He kissed Karen on the cheek. "Sorry, traffic," he whispered. She nodded. "Of course. You made it just in time." He didn't notice the edge in her voice. Or maybe he did, and he was just pretending, like always. Haley showed up half an hour later, trailing behind Linda, who looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Haley's face was pale but composed. No eye contact, no greeting. She headed straight for the drink table and poured herself soda like she belonged. Karen kept her distance, watching, waiting. Then something unexpected happened. While Jenna helped refill the chips, she leaned in and whispered, "You need to see something." Karen followed her sister inside, into the den. Jenna opened her phone and pulled up a message she'd received an hour earlier, from a friend who worked at the school board. "Hey, thought you should know. Rumors about Tom are flying. Someone submitted an anonymous complaint. Something about a student he was mentoring. No name attached, but apparently the school's looking into it quietly." Karen blinked. "I didn't send anything," she said. Then someone else did. Her mind raced. Haley? Was this her backup plan? Or maybe Linda had finally pieced things together. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Karen returned to the backyard, her pulse drumming faster now. Tom stood by the grill, flipping skewers, laughing with two dads from the block. But his posture was a little too stiff, his smile a little too wide. He knew. Karen didn't wait anymore. She walked over to the patio, picked up the remote, and turned off the music. Conversations drifted to silence like someone had cut the air itself. Heads turned. Glasses stilled midair. Tom looked up, confused. Everything okay? Karen smiled sweetly. Can I have everyone's attention for just a moment? There was an awkward murmur of agreement. A few people chuckled nervously. Karen looked around. At faces she'd known for years, at children she'd watched grow, at neighbors who'd come into her home without ever knowing what lived in its walls. I wanted to share something tonight, she said, her voice steady. Something real, something honest. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out the USB. Tom's face dropped. His body froze, hand still hovering above the grill. Karen looked him dead in the eye. But before I do, she said slowly, Tom, do you want to tell them first? Or should I? The world narrowed. Tom took a shaky breath. Karen, let's not do this here. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Linda furrowed her brow. Haley looked down at her shoes. No, Karen said. Okay, I'll do it. She turned and walked to the outdoor TV mounted on the back wall of the house, usually reserved for sports games and movie nights. She plugged in the drive, selected the file, and hit play. At first, there was nothing but grainy night footage. Then shadows formed. Then movement. Two figures, one of them unmistakably Tom. The other, unmistakably not his wife. The kiss was undeniable. The intimacy unmissable. A collective gasp rolled through the crowd. A child asked, "Is that Mr. Wilson?" Karen turned back around. Tom looked like someone had punched the air out of him. His mouth opened, then closed. His face drained of color. Linda was already moving toward Haley, her voice rising in disbelief. Tell me that's not you. Tell me. Haley said nothing. Everything fell apart at once. A neighbor dropped his glass. Someone muttered, Jesus Christ. One woman covered her mouth and turned away. Tom took a step toward Karen. Can we please talk about this privately? She stepped back. No, Tom. You don't get privacy anymore. He looked around at the faces now staring at him like a stranger. You're destroying my life. Karen smiled. No, Tom. You did that. Then she turned to the crowd. You all deserved to know. And now you do. No one clapped. No one cheered. There was only silence. Then the slow, awkward shuffle of people picking up their kids, grabbing purses, walking away in murmurs. Like a funeral procession with paper plates. Karen stood there, still as a statue, as her world burned around her. And for the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. But peace doesn't last. Because as the yard emptied and Tom slumped against the wall like a man already buried, Karen's phone buzzed. One message. Unknown number. You don't know the whole story. Meet me. Tonight. Alone. She stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. Below the text, a location pin. The name attached to it sent a chill down her spine. Haley Parker. Tom stared at the letter for a long moment, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less damning. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead, casting a yellow pallor over his face. When he finally looked up, there was no confession in his eyes, only calculation. I didn't sleep with Linda, he said, voice low and rehearsed. Whatever that letter says, she was emotional. Maybe she wanted something to happen. Maybe she wished it had, but it never did. Karen didn't blink. She wrote it in her own hand. She kept it. You stayed in the same hotel on that conference trip. You expect me to believe she fabricated all of it? Tom exhaled sharply, brushing a hand through his hair. We were drunk. We talked. Maybe things got close, but I stopped it. I respected you, Karen. I always Respected me? Her voice cracked like glass. You kissed a girl young enough to be your daughter in our backyard. And you're standing in my kitchen telling me you respected me? Tom stepped forward, palms raised. That was different. That wasn't planned. I didn't mean for that to happen. Karen laughed, bitter and short. Didn't mean to kiss her? Or didn't mean to keep doing it for months behind my back? He faltered. His lips pressed into a tight line, jaw working like he wanted to form another excuse, but couldn't find one that sounded plausible anymore. I made mistakes, he said finally. But that letter, don't let it twist everything. Linda's unstable. You've said it yourself. You really believe she's some reliable narrator now? After all these years? Karen didn't answer. She just stared. And that silence, quiet and suffocating, did something to him. It made him lean in closer, soften his voice, tilt his head just enough to mimic sincerity. I miss you, Karen, he murmured. You and me, we used to laugh. We used to feel things. I screwed up, but can't we try again? Without all this noise from the past. There it was, the pivot, the emotional bait. She saw it clearly now, the pattern. Deflection, charm, revisionism. He was trying to fold her pain back into the narrative of them as if they were still salvageable, as if betrayal could be softened with shared nostalgia. But Karen wasn't the same woman who'd once chosen forgiveness for smaller trespasses. That version of her had been peeled away, layer by layer, until all that remained was someone cold and clear-eyed. She didn't speak, didn't nod. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there with the letter between his fingers like it might catch fire. Upstairs, the house was dark and still. She sat at the edge of her bed and stared out the window into the blackness beyond. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass, older than she remembered, harder around the eyes. The truth about Linda had cracked open something deeper. It wasn't just the affair with Haley. It wasn't even about Linda, not entirely. It was the growing, gnawing realization that maybe she'd never truly known the man she'd married. Maybe she'd built her life on a fiction, a carefully curated persona that Tom had crafted, and she'd willingly bought into because it made everything easier. And now she didn't want to confront him. She wanted to understand him, understand how far it went. Who else? What else? She wasn't seeking revenge, at least not only that. She wanted clarity, proof, history. She needed to hold the whole truth in her hands and see it for what it was, not just what he was willing to admit. But there was fear, too, because once you start digging, you can't unearth just one thing. Skeletons rarely stay in one grave. She picked up her phone and hovered her thumb over Elise Ramsey's name. 1,000 possibilities churned beneath her calm exterior. What if there were more women? What if he'd used his position at school to manipulate others? What if this wasn't about infidelity, but patterned behavior? What if she found something that not only destroyed Tom, but destroyed everything her sons believed about their father? She thought of them, sleeping down the hall, untouched by the rot just yet. Her thumb pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, then a voice picked up, firm and familiar. Elise Ramsey. Karen closed her eyes. I need your help, and I don't want you to stop until I know everything. A pause. Then Elise, tell me his name. Karen opened her eyes. Thomas Wilson. Husband. Father. Liar. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the trees. Inside, Karen pulled the curtains shut and waited. As the sun dipped behind the trees and the soft murmur of conversation drifted across the yard, Karen walked toward the garden fence, where a woman stood alone nursing a half-empty glass of lemonade. Her name was Melanie, a quiet single mother Karen had only spoken to in passing at school functions. They'd exchanged polite smiles, traded casserole recipes once at a bake sale. But now, as Melanie turned to her, eyes glinting with something deeper, Karen saw the unspoken understanding there, the recognition of a shared scar. Melanie didn't hesitate. I just wanted to say thank you, she said softly, for what you did, for making it visible. Karen tilted her head. You knew. I suspected. Years ago, when I was new here, Tom made me uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. I thought no one would believe me. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Karen placed a gentle hand on her arm. You weren't. Melanie's voice caught. Watching you stand up like that? It gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just two women standing in the golden light of a reclaimed backyard, bound by what had once silenced them, and what no longer would. Karen smiled. Not the brittle kind she'd worn for years, but something warmer, real. It's not just about burning down what's broken, she said quietly. It's about planting something new in its place. Melanie nodded, and the two of them stood there, side by side, the late breeze tugging at their sleeves, stronger than they had ever been on their own. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the dishes were stacked, Karen lingered in the boys' room, watching them sleep. One sprawled across his bed, one curled like a question mark beneath the blanket. They were growing faster now, faces sharper, voices lower, minds filled with new questions about the world and the people who built it. She had wondered, in the worst moments, what kind of damage the truth might do to them. But the truth had not broken them. It had shaped them. They'd seen ugliness, yes, but also strength. They saw a woman refuse to stay silent, refuse to let lies rot the foundation of their home. They watched her stand her ground when it would have been easier to fold. And maybe, just maybe, they were learning what it meant to become men who didn't hide behind silence or charm or power, but who stood beside the truth, even when it was hard. That was the legacy she was building now. Not just for herself, but through them. In the quiet hours before sleep, Karen sat alone on the back steps, sipping tea under a sky peppered with stars. The garden shed stood dark and empty now, its door slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Once it had been a place of secrets. Now it was just a shed. Ordinary, hollow, just the way she wanted it. She took a breath. Not because she needed to. She'd been breathing all her life, but because for the first time in years it didn't feel heavy. She didn't need revenge anymore. She didn't even need answers. She had herself, and she was enough. The wind rustled the trees above her as if whispering something ancient and true. Karen stood, walked inside, and closed the door behind her. Not to shut out the world, but to open something new within it. She wasn't rebuilding what had been lost. She was building something better, and this time it was hers.